We sold this place out in about hardly any time at all, proving once and for all that here in Manhattan Beach, science rules. Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Matthews, the proud superintendent of the Manhattan Beach Unified School District. We're so thrilled to have almost 1,500 of you here. We're a place that I think we do so many things well, but we do science, I think, really well. I hope you saw our math and science, beautiful new building there. I was in the Manhattan Beach Middle School auditorium last week. How many of you were in that auditorium that day to hear our conversation with an astronaut that very day? That's exactly right. One of the best science days I've ever seen. 10 of our kids talking to the International Space Station up there. And at the end of it, 500 people standing ovation for what we did here in Manhattan Beach, doing science, talking to astronauts, and making it all work, because that's who we are and that's who you are. Yeah, it was a great moment. It was a great moment. We don't get here alone, everybody. We don't get here alone. First of all, a special shout out to Page's Bookstore right here in Manhattan Beach. Yep. Those guys organized this, and at the spur of the moment, they're great to work with. I love their store, and go shop there, and I thank them for what they did. And buy some books afterwards. There's a couple available there, so get out there and buy some books. I also want to thank the Manhattan Beach Education Foundation, MBEF, who is a major sponsor for us. MBEF raises a lot of money for us. I'll say 10% of our budget. But they also inspire us. And MBEF pays for all of our elementary science specialists out there. They're paying for our entire new Makerspace program we have going. How many of you love Makerspace out there? That's exactly right. It's a very cool program. Because of MBEF, our kids are doing science from K on. And so we appreciate their support. We appreciate you being here. I love that my family and your families get to meet Bill Nye, the Science Guy, and Greg Mone. It's going to be a great night. And so to introduce him, I want to introduce Ms. Farnaz Fleckner, who runs our MBEF organization and helped make all this happen. Farnaz.
Everyone. So I know Mike already spoke about Pages, but I do want to take a moment to recognize Margot Ferris. Pages has been a big supporter of MBEF for many years, and they bring opportunities like this to our community. So I want to give a round of applause to Margot. Where are you? So we've been asked a couple of times, do parent contribution support events like this? And the answer is no. We don't use parent support for this. In fact, our program to operations or administration ratio is one of the best in the nonprofit sector. 94 cents of every dollar that you give to MBEF goes to fund teachers and educators throughout the district. So many of you have already seen our video this year. You've already sat in on school finance presentations, and you know that our district gets less funding than any other district in Los Angeles County from the state. And we're fourth from the bottom in all of the state of California. But because we have such an amazing community, because of all of you, we have exceptional schools. So all of you teachers in the room and all of you parents, thank you so much for your support. If you've had a chance to support our campaign this year, thank you. And if you haven't, please take a moment to learn about MBEF, become an advocate for our schools, learn about school finance. We need more people to understand this and understand why MBEF has to exist. Thank you. So logistics for this evening. So when our guests are done, we're going to ask everyone to empty the auditorium, so you have to go back to the end. If you want to stay for book signing, you can line up in an orderly fashion, similar to the way you lined up to get inside. There's books for sale. We really hope that you will support Pages by purchasing books tonight. And if you don't want to wait in line to have your book signed, there's a ton of pre-signed books available for sale as well. I think they're a perfect birthday present, so if you have to go to a birthday. So now to introduce our esteemed guests. So, Bill Nye doesn't need much of an introduction. So, just a little background. Just the fact that we filled this auditorium so quickly is a testament to the fact that Bill Nye has been able to make science fun for children of all ages. Bill's mom was a code breaker in World War II. He has a background in engineering, and he invented a hydraulic resonance thank you, suppressor tube that's still used in 747 planes. And in 1986, he left Boeing to work on a television show called Almost Live, and has since led a ton of science shows. He's joined by Greg Mone. Greg is a novelist and a science journalist and a speaker. He's written many books. His first was written in kindergarten, for all you little ones out there. It was about a dinosaur with flatulence problems. Yeah. And he's written books about sharks attacking alien ships. He's a graduate from Harvard College, a nationally ranked competitive swimmer, and so he has a lot of swimming themes in his books. And he's also the contributing editor for Popular Science magazine. So give him a round of applause.
Thank you, Margot. Thank you. Any questions on what we've covered so far?
All right, so the dinosaur book isn't a real book. Yeah. It was a book I wrote when I was little, but it's not in bookstores or anything like that.
I wrote a dinosaur book.
A real one.
Yeah. But the dinosaurs, although I had speculated in the book that dinosaurs and birds may have a common ancestor, the dinosaurs depicted in Bill Nye's Great Big Dinosaur Dig don't have feathers, whereas now everybody's pretty sure that all the ancient dinosaurs had feathers, especially when they were kids, or dids, whatever you call them when you're an ancient dinosaur.
So, I have some questions for Mr. Nye here, but before we get started on that, I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about how this project got started, because it actually got started right out here in your neighborhood. I was out here a few years ago reporting a story for Popular Science magazine, and I go to this coffee shop to get ready to go interview a couple people. And I'm sitting in the coffee shop taking down my notes and everything, and I look across the way and there's Bill Nye the Science Guy. And I was like, oh, that's so cool, that's amazing. You know, we just been talking about him in the office. So I went over and introduced myself and said, hey, I'm a science writer and I write fiction as well, and I love your stuff and what you're doing is so awesome. We got to talking, and next thing I know, we started talking about surfing for some reason. And Bill was telling me he'd just taken up surfing. And I just kind of threw a flyer out there. I said, well, actually, you know, I'm going surfing with a buddy of mine tomorrow morning if you want to come with us. And he said, yeah, sure, I'd love to. Tell me where you're going. So I go the next morning with my friend. My friend's like, dude, no way Bill Nye the Science Guy is going to show up here tomorrow morning. And I'm like, he's going to come. And he's like, yeah, whatever, Mone. He's not going to show up, you know? So then Bill shows up, and we paddle out. And there are pretty good waves, and it's not too crowded, which is, I understand, is a rarity out here. But the whole time we're out there surfing, Bill is watching the waves and talking about the physics of the waves and the science of the waves and how they break. And then he's talking about his waterproof watch and how he got this watch so long ago and how it's amazing that a watch like this is so well engineered and never leaks any water and does this, that, and the other thing. And the whole time I was sitting out there, I thought, oh man, this guy's awesome. I got to figure out a way to work with him someday.
But he can't surf.
Yeah, but you were out there, it doesn't matter.
You were thinking that too.
So anyway, a few years go by, and then Bill reaches out to me and says, hey, I want to write some fiction. I want to collaborate and come up with a series of adventure novels for kids. So my first question to you is, after all these years being an educator in nonfiction, teaching all these kids about science, why'd you want to do fiction? Like, why'd you want to tell stories?
Thank you. I had...
He didn't know that question was coming,
Well, I've been asked this before, but when I was a kid, we had, you guys, how many people are familiar with the Hardy Boys? And Nancy Drew, right? Well, there was another series a long time ago called Tom Swift Jr., and my friend's dad was really into Tom Swift Sr., so I read all the Tom Swift Jr. books, Tom Swift and his Flying Lab, Tom Swift and his Outpost in Space, Tom Swift and his Megascope projector, and all these fantastic ideas about what the technology was going to enable us to do as people. And I thought these books had a tremendous influence on me. And then when this opportunity came to create stories that would maybe engage you guys, young people who watch the Nye the Science Guy show, I thought, that's the coolest idea ever. And Greg is just really good. He can just lay down dialogue. I come up with these brilliant ideas. And Greg just makes these characters and things come to life. It's really cool. We have, so far, a good relationship. So if I were to catch a wave, which happens now and then, I mean, even a blind squirrel finds an acorn once in a while. Greg will surf down around me. He'll slow down, come back, I think twice, while I'm on the same wave. And then he'll paddle out and wait for a half hour for me to get back. And so that's kind of the model for writing the books. It's been really good. Anyway, I really hope you guys enjoy these stories. We put our hearts and soul into these things. And there's 3 problems I want I want us to solve as humankind, and the events of the last couple weeks with Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma really drive it home for me. We want clean water for everyone. We want renewably produced, reliable electricity for everyone. And we want the internet, or whatever the internet comes to be called in the coming decades, for everyone. Cool, thank you. Yes. Sitting on stage here really isn't the same as doing it. But it's a start, doggone it. Because if everybody has clean water, they're healthy, and it's a good chance they'll be able to farm, to raise crops. And then if everybody has electricity, you can do all these magical things, like with calculators and phones and microphones and lights. And then if everybody has access to the internet, we can have education for everybody, especially girls and women, and this will change the world. So, in the background of the books are these ideas. Whoa, way back there. Hidden.
Only slightly hidden, yeah, but each book centers on one of those ideas, and it's fun because Bill does have a lot of rules about how we want these books to go, and at first I was a little wary of working with someone who had all these ideas and everything, but luckily everyone he's come up with, at first I get really mad and I'm like, no, my idea was better, like in the first book, I wanted to set it up in the Arctic Ocean, and Bill was like, no, we got to go to Antarctica. We got to go to the South Pole. It's much cooler. And I was like, nah, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, that's a terrible idea. I want to go north. And then I started thinking about it and doing a little research, and he's totally right. It's a much cooler place.
Well, the idea was it's more likely that you'd find, I don't want to give too much away, you'd find sea creatures that were undiscovered. That was the idea. It's science fiction, you guys, but it's cool.
Yeah, so one of the rules also was everything in this book, in these books, has to be realistic, right? So, nobody's putting a jetpack on and flying across the country or anything like that.
You can put on jetpacks, but right now, for those of you of a certain age, I watched the very first Super Bowl in 1964. I know some people, yes, there were people alive. Yes, 1964, and there was a cool moment where this was the first interaction between the National Football League and what at that time was called the American Football League. These have been changed to the National Football Conference and the American Football Conference. But they had a guy with a jetpack representing each league. And the two guys fly up in this fabulous looping maneuver and then shake hands. And you can only fly for about 30 seconds back then. And today, you can still only go for about 30 seconds because of, if for those of you familiar with Lieutenant Scott, who's a fictional character on Star Trek, we can't change the laws of physics. And so the jetpacks are still limited. And if you ever saw The Rocketeer, the movie, the guy's flying all over the place with nothing but rubbing alcohol driving his rocket. It's just, there's not enough energy there. I'm open-minded, of course, but it's that sort of constraint I put on Greg, and he just rolls his eyes.
Now, in the front row here, I heard someone was disappointed that there were no jetpacks, you know, and that's okay. Yeah, it was you. All right, that's cool. But I got to tell you, even when we stick to realism and we stick to the laws of physics, there's some amazing stuff we can put in these books. So I write a lot of stories about kids and teenagers who are making stuff in their basements and their backyards and their garages. And it's amazing what kids are doing these days, right? Like, I wrote a story about a kid who built a submarine in his basement, a one-person submarine that he can take around on the lake in his backyard. There's a pair of girls, sisters, who built perfect replicas of the Mars rovers. Another kid, one of my favorite kids, he decided when he was 14 years old and knew nothing about robotics that he wanted to build a robotic arm to help people who'd lost a limb. So the kid gradually transformed his bedroom into this robotics lab, where at one point when he was all done, apparently his dad was telling me, like, his bed was in the hallway, he was hanging his clothes in the bathroom, and he had like a 3D printer in his closet and workbenches everywhere. And the kid did it. He built a working prototype by the time he was 16.
What's so weird about that?
Yeah, exactly. So even though there's no jetpacks.
Where do you keep your clothes?
Yeah,
where's your 3D printer?
Yeah.
You're just not in the closet? You have a whole special place for it? Oh.
Yeah. But it's interesting, you know, because like Bill will send these ideas at me. Like I'll get emails in the middle of the night saying, hey, Greg, we got to have CubeSats in this book. And Ava and Matt need to build a CubeSat. And a CubeSat, I don't know if you know what these tiny little, well, you can tell them what a CubeSat is.
Sure. Well, a cubical satellite is a standard now. They started out as just people messing around, but it's 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters, a cube, and it's a satellite, so it's a CubeSat. And now there are other standards that have devolved, like the Planetary Society launched our own light sail spacecraft. It was a 3-unit CubeSat, so it was 10 by 10 by 30. But for you centimeter buffs, that's still literally smaller than a loaf of bread. It's this big. And the sails that came out of it are about, well, if you consider this lighted area right here, about twice that big. Almost as big as this whole stage. Came out of this little box. It's very cool. So in the next book, we have some critical communications that take place with CubeSats.
And this is actually, I don't know if I told you this, but in doing the research for this, I was checking with this NASA scientist who works on satellites, and I was trying to figure out how often this satellite would fly over the rainforest where the book takes place. And I was telling him I'm writing a book with Bill Nye, and then he said, oh, did you know that we beamed Bill's show to the moon? I didn't know that. So they beamed Bill Nye the Science Guy to the moon and back to demonstrate this new laser communication system. So Bill's
your tax dollars at work, everyone. So everybody, you may have heard of radar, right? That's radio detection and ranging is what it started out. And sonar is sound navigation and ranging. Oh, I don't know if you're familiar with LIDAR, which is light interferometry detection and ranging. And so the LIDAR systems use a laser. And they're crazy. The potential, you can get a lot more information sent back and forth from, for example, the moon or more likely Mars. So you can just, the higher the frequency of the wave, whether it's a radio wave or a light wave, which are just the same thing at different frequencies, the more information you can pack into it. But when you have this high information beam, it has to be aimed much more accurately than the low information beam. And so you guys are all coming of an age where light, like we have fiber optics now all over the place, light will be used in interplanetary communication also. It's cool, it's exciting.
So we were talking backstage a little bit, and I hear you guys have this amazing community inclusion effort here in Manhattan Beach. And when we were conceiving this book, we knew we wanted to have 3 kids, and we knew that we wanted one of them to be this kind of science genius who knows all about the solar system and stars and nature and how it all works. And another kid, this girl Ava, to be kind of like the maker, the ultimate engineer, you know, where she builds her own drone and a motorized skateboard, and she speaks a bunch of languages, and what else? She's really good at math. She might be the smartest one, actually.
Well, she comes across, to me, as the smartest one.
Yes. And then
why is that, everybody? Because she's a girl.
Yeah. So this is the thing, though. Bill insisted. He said, look, we got to have this be a diverse cast. You know, we got to have this cast. And so tell me a little bit about why that was important to you.
Well, Margot mentioned my mom. So my mother was graduated from college in 1942. So this is the spring after the U.S. was attacked in Pearl Harbor. And wait, there's a little more. My dad had this great idea to get money for what people who are getting married called their nest egg, to get money, put it in the bank so he could ask my mom to marry him. And he took a job on Wake Island. And you may not have ever heard of Wake Island, but you go to Hawaii and then you go about that far again, another 5,000 nautical miles out in the middle of Pacific Ocean nowhere. It's across the international date line. So on December 7th, Pearl Harbor was bombed, and it was the same morning, but it was called December 8th on Wake Island. And my dad and his buddies fought back for a couple weeks, but they were captured and spent the whole war, almost 4 years, as prisoners of war. And I just tell everybody, if you get a chance to be a prisoner of war, don't do it. Just, it sounds like a real drag. So anyway, my dad had gone to Johns Hopkins back in Baltimore, Maryland. And my mom went to Goucher College, which is used to be what they call the sister school to Hopkins. Hopkins was men only, Goucher was women only. Now Goucher is co-ed, they let women in, they let men in. It's gone, you know, it's terrible now. I mean, according to my mom, that's a joke, it's a joke. My mom went to college. The dean of students was Dorothy Stimson, who was the first cousin of Henry Stimson, who was the Secretary of War, back when it was called the Department of War. Now we call it the Department of Defense. I'll let you decide on that. And so he apparently said to his cousin, do you have any women that can come work on this thing? I can't tell you what it is. So my mom worked on the Enigma Code, which was this German code in World War II, and just coming out in October in a few weeks is a new book that Margot alluded to called Code Girls, and it's the first time I found out anything about what my mom did. She wouldn't talk about it our whole lives. What did you do during the war, Mom? Huh? Can't talk about it. But she did something in the neutral shipping room, which is where they kept track of boats that were, or ships rather, that were supposed to be neutral but probably were resupplying German U-boats. And they did it because they cracked this German code through mathematics. So the family myth is that my mother was good at mathematics and science, and I was brought up with that. And my mother insisted that I learn to sew, and I'm an okay cook. I'm okay, not a genius, I'm okay. They don't do a show with me cooking, not yet. Yeah.
But next.
Yeah, but all these things that my mother insisted that we all learn to do gave me an appreciation for inclusion. Like my friends would consider sewing to be for women only, and changing tires to be for men only back in those days. But my mother insisted that everybody learn to do everything, and that just kind of rubbed off on me. And so when I think about somebody who's good at math and science and making stuff, I think of Ava in our books. So it's, one is, I'm playing the hand I was dealt, as we say. I was brought up with all this, so I wanted to put it in there. And then looking back, I grew up in Washington, D.C., in the city limits of Washington, D.C. And just looking back there were people, most of the population of Washington was African American. And there was just this weird background. I don't know how else to describe it. Things were just not fair. And I sensed that. Somehow I sensed that. And so I've tried to promote inclusion as a result of that. And so I'm very happy. Well, thank you, but all I would say, everybody, is it's not my fault. I mean, you grow up with it and you're watching what's going on around you, and you come to be. So I'm very happy that the geniuses are in there with Jack. I'm very happy that Jack wears a bow tie. And there's another character named Hank, whom of course I admire because he's sort of like me, only successful. No, he's really good. He does all these cool inventions, and even though he's absent-minded, somehow he gets by.
Yeah.
I love him.
We actually did. Originally, when we were writing it, Jack, who's kind of the narrator and the main character, he just had a regular old tie, and Bill was like, "Greg, what's going on?
Dude,
come on, we got to give this kid a bow tie." You know?
What is it? It's gonna end up in the spinning lathe. It's gonna slip in his soup. It's gonna flop into his flask. It's very troublesome. You don't want that.
So Bill also mentioned Wake Island and Hawaii, and so in the first book, we send these characters down to the South Pole to solve this mystery down there. I won't tell you too much about it. In the second book, they go to another island north of Hawaii. It's not Wake Island, but it's this island called Nihoa. And then in the third book, we send them down to the Amazon rainforest. Now, in each case, we both kind of agreed that, it's more fun to write a book when you set it in a really interesting place. And then we thought it would be more fun to take readers to these cool places. Now, this second book that's set in Hawaii, or north of Hawaii, there's also a lot going on with the deep ocean in the book, right? So the kids drop down, Jack drops down 2,000 feet in a submersible and checks things out. There's this amazing electricity system that basically takes like cold water from way down in the ocean and brings it back up, and it's a really neat system. But Bill, again, was very insistent on, hey, we gotta make the ocean a big theme of this book. So why? And
you're a competitive swimmer and a fantastic surfer. It wasn't a big reach for you.
Oh no, I like it. I'm just saying. So why do you think ocean exploration is so important?
Oh, so sorry. Oh, yeah. You're just playing with me.
Yes.
Most of the world is covered with the ocean, and the ocean affects the weather like nothing else. And even if you live in Nebraska, half of the oxygen you breathe comes from the ocean. Here on the shore, almost all of it comes from the ocean. And so we all depend on the ocean to live. So writing about it is very important. And then also we want to take care of the ocean. We want to take care of Heal the Bay, for example. We want to be stewards of it. It is sobering to think, everybody, that humankind moves more rock and soil than Mother Nature does now. We're talking about erosion and volcanoes. They do less than you and me, than we do. And so we have a responsibility as animals here on this planet to take care of it. I mean, this is our home, this is our deal. And everywhere you look on the earth, you find evidence of people. Even out in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of ocean nowhere, you'll find evidence of humans. You'll find ships. You'll find this big circle of trash, of plastic. You'll find containers that have fallen off of ships. And if you have the chemical analysis capability, you'll be able to detect activity from people, no matter where you go in the sea. I really want to emphasize the ocean. And then also, to me, it is sobering to consider further that it is really quite a bit easier, much easier, fantastically much easier, to explore the surface of the moon than the bottom of the sea. Because the sea has three problems, what I call the three C's of the sea. It's cold, it will crush you, and it's corrosive. Salt water just messes with everything. And so it's just really important for humans to understand the ocean. And come on, what's more romantic than sailing around on the ocean? How cool is that? And so, you know, when you go to Hawaii, just the diversity of fish is amazing. And not the last time he got to meet me, but the time before that, when President Obama got to meet me. One thing led to another, and I told him the story about a journalist had asked me if I could go anywhere in the cosmos, where would I want to go? And I thought about it for a moment, and I said, well, Hawaii, really. Hawaii's pretty good. It's warm, you can breathe, there's fish, it's sunny, it's fantastic. Whereas, you know, if you go to Mars, for example, there's no air. And you would notice that right away. You know, you open the cabin door, and then you'll find there's no food and there's no water. That's all, or hardly any water. And so Hawaii and the Pacific Ocean just have a real special place for me.
So yeah, I actually tried to send the kids to Mars in one of the books, and Bill right away was like, no, Mars is too hard. You're not going to Mars.
We'll get there.
But anyway, I do have a question for you on that subject. So in the first book, there's a character, a scientist who's working down at the South Pole, and she is down there to learn more about extraterrestrial life. Now that might seem kind of odd to go try to understand extraterrestrial life by going down to the South Pole, but what she's doing is she's trying to look for what kind of life forms survive under the ice shelf there, down in this really cold water that's cut off from the light, so that she can get a better understanding of what might be living under this thick layer of ice on Europa, this moon of Jupiter, you know, that's got a beautiful big ocean beneath it.
Twice as much seawater as the Earth, discovered by Margie Kivelson, a woman astrobiologist. Yeah.
So, my question is, if you had a choice between sending people to Mars or sending a robot that could poke down beneath the ice and cruise around in the ocean and send data back, what would you think would be cooler?
Oh, I want to send a probe to Europa. And I'll tell you why, you guys. I strongly believe that if we can discover evidence of life on another world, and just shooting from the hip, I'd say the most likely thing is to find some sort of fossil microbe on Mars. Hey, is this working now? No. I heard it sounded echo. It sounded like it got more powerful. Mars is smaller than the Earth. It cooled off faster than the Earth. It had an ocean before the Earth. Geologists have all determined this by sending spacecraft there for about 30 years. And so it's very reasonable that life, if it just starts on its own, it started on Mars before it started here. Very reasonable. Then the other super logical place to look is Europa, this moon of Jupiter with all this ocean water. And what we want to do is build a spacecraft that's able to look very closely at rocks and soil, or able to look very closely at ocean water without contaminating it. You know, this, another Star Trek reference, you don't want to violate the prime directive. Like, you don't want to contaminate the other world. And it's really important scientifically, because you don't want to think you found microbes on Mars, but actually they're just microbes that you brought with you from Earth by accident.
Look, they have sandwiches here. No.
Wow, there's a Starbucks on Mars. Yeah, who knew? Yeah. That would be surprising. But you know what wouldn't be? If there's an Amazon.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be. There's a warehouse. Yeah. So it probably is. Anyway, my claim, everybody, is if we find evidence of life, it will change the course of human history. It will be like Copernicus showing that the Earth goes around the sun instead of the sun around the Earth. It would be like Galileo pointing out that the celestial motions are happening whether or not you believe in them, and that the moon is not a perfect sphere. It's got bumps and mountains and stuff. And I'll show you with this telescope. Oh, I'm sorry, Galileo, we have to imprison you. You can't leave your house for the rest of your life because you took a telescope and looked at the moon. Anyways, I claim these discoveries would change everything. It would change the way everybody feels about being a living thing on the Earth. Be amazing.
So I have one more question for you, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience, unless I'm...
That's great. Yes, no, it's perfect. You're perfect. Right, genius. Brilliant.
But also I want to thank Costa Mira High School for having us here. Mira Costa.
Go Mustangs. Woo!
That's all right. Yesterday I told my brother lives out here, and I told him I was speaking at Costa Mesa High School. He was like, what? What are you talking about?
No, they surf there.
Also, thank you to the Manhattan Beach Education Foundation and to Page's Bookstore.
Yes, Page's
awesome bookstore.
Thanks, Page's Bookstore.
All right, so my question, the point of these books is first and foremost to be a fun, entertaining read. Second, we want to inspire a passion for science and a curiosity about the world and the way the world works. Now, if you had any advice, I think we got some young scientists and makers in the audience here tonight. Do you have any advice for these kids who are out here?
Yes, two things. First of all, try it. Whatever it is, try it. Almost all the time, you don't regret what you do. You regret what you don't do. Almost all the time. Oh, I wonder if I can go on this bicycle down this steep hill with no brakes. Okay, that's a bad example. I wonder what would happen if I swam out where I couldn't see the shore anymore. That's bad. Okay. But most of the time, I wonder if I should try taking this chemistry class. I heard it was hard. But you think you'll surprise yourself. Just try it. And the second thing I say to everybody in high school, or getting ready to go to high school, or what have you, is make sure you learn to do algebra. And I'm not joking you. Because we're this in a high school audience. Algebra, there's a couple things about it. It teaches you to think. It enables you to think abstractly about numbers. And there's very compelling research that shows that it probably enables you to think abstractly about all sorts of things that have nothing to do with numbers. So along that line, it sucked for me too, okay? You have to practice. When it comes to math, you just have to do it over and over. I'm sorry, man. It's just how it is. You might go through a long time in school where you go, this is easy, I got this, no problem. 2 + 3 is 5, yes, right. Yes, but then when it comes to algebra and things get abstract, you got to lean into it. And I hated word problems as much as the next guy. But you guys, you'll get there. Just try it, and algebra. And also when you're trying things at home, be sure to clean it up. Yeah. Thank you, Greg. Now we have questions from the audience.
Yes, I'm also a huge fan, quickly, of one of the things Bill likes to say, which is everybody
knows something you don't.
Everybody you meet.
Everyone you'll ever meet knows something you don't know. At first, very troubling, because I thought I knew everything, especially when I was a teenager. But you'll find that everybody knows something you don't, and so celebrate that. Everybody you'll ever meet can teach you something. It's amazing. It's amazing. Thank you for that prompt, Greg.
All right. So we got people maybe organizing questions.
And we got microphones. We do not have 2 turntables, but we have
It's hard to,
2
yeah.
microphones.
But thank you guys for sitting here and listening.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Here, we take it.
Hi.
Hat woman.
Do you think that we'll ever be able to get people on Mars, like either through means, like, I mean, because I know budget-wise it could be a problem, or just like physics-wise it could be a problem. Do you think we'll ever be able to get people up there?
Yes, so is anybody here a member of the Planetary Society? Well, you can all join. Are you really? Right on, I love you. Planetary.org, check us out. We were started by Carl Sagan, from whom I took 1 class. I'm a charter member, and now I'm the CEO of the Planetary Society, and our headquarters is in Pasadena. But here's what we did. We sponsored a study with people at the Jet Propulsion Lab and 70 experts on rockets and space science from around the world. And we showed that you could send people in orbit around Mars in 2033 without increasing the NASA budget. You just have to decide to do it. Not have NASA doing a whole bunch of other things. You just have to adjust for inflation. And if you were to up it a little bit, the NASA budget, you could send people in orbit by 2028. And I mention orbit because that's how we explored the moon. There was a spacecraft called Apollo 8 that orbited the moon before Apollo 11 landed there. And we proposed the same system for exploring Mars. You go to orbit Mars, make sure you can get there, and then you would, what we call teleoperate, you would use radio signals from a spacecraft in orbit around Mars to control things on rovers and spacecraft on the surface of Mars, and you wouldn't lose this tremendous, sometimes 20-minute each way radio communication. And so they can, when you have rovers on Mars right now, you can lose days at a time waiting for signals to get transmitted and received and decisions to be made that you could do much more quickly with people in orbit. And then 2, 4, or 6 years later, you'd land on Mars. And I say 2, 4, or 6, you can practically only go to Mars every 26 months. Every 2 years and 2 months, just the orbits of Earth and Mars. So we at the Planetary Society advocate this because humans are going to land there sooner or later, and I would just as soon it be sooner. And so what we want to do is send robotic spacecraft to look for signs of life, set aside what we call refuges, places where humans will not go wandering around till after we have studied it carefully, studied these areas carefully, and then have people land there. So yes, I believe in your lifetime, people will land on Mars. And I'm hoping I'm still alive. I'm hoping for it.
And if you study, maybe you could be one of them.
You could be one of them.
Yeah.
How was your experience on Dancing with the Stars?
What was the first part? I can't hear anymore.
How was your experience?
Oh, it's the coolest thing. Until the very end. No, for those of you unfamiliar, it was 4 years ago. Right about now, September, 4 years ago. Yeah, so I was tearing it up. Things were going great. It was big fun. And there's a little bit of, the judges are trying to keep it all kind of even as you go along. Things are going well. But then I tore what's called the quadriceps tendon of my left knee. And the sports medicine doctor has an ultrasound like you look for babies with. And he said, if this is a normal knee, these would be tendons. This is what you have, an 80% tear. And I just fell down. And my partner, Tyne Steckline, who is just charming, she just had a birthday. She said to me, are you okay? You always have a microphone on that show. You're not allowed to go anywhere without a freaking microphone on. And she said, are you okay? And I said, nope. Have you ever done this, Greg? You get a letter opener, a metal letter opener, and then get it red hot, and then just jam it into you. Have you ever done that?
Yeah.
Well, then you know what I'm talking
totally,
about. Yeah,
totally.
That's how it feels.
Yeah.
I have never done that, but that's really, man, did that hurt. Wow. And you can't stand up. You just fall right over. And so it was the coolest thing ever. My knee is mostly healed, but still, if I go up steps 2 at a time, 4 years later, I can still feel it. And I said to the sports medicine doctor, this guy, Dr. Scott out in Encino, California, I said, why did this happen? You know, I'm in pretty good shape. He said, you're old. Okay. Yeah. So, you know, so it was the coolest thing. And I was there, I went back for the finals last season. It was cool. Cool to be back. A lot of the same people still work there. It was really fun.
Okay, our next question is right here.
Okay, yeah, I'll tighten it up, yes.
Okay, so I was just wondering what your views are on string theory and like what you think of it if it ever gets completed or if it will ever get completed.
What do I think about? I can't hear anymore.
String theory.
Oh, string theory is great. So for those of you unfamiliar, there are mysteries of the universe. And one of them is, how did we all get here? What came before the Big Bang? I guess that's the same thing. And then what holds it all together? So there is some evidence when you examine subatomic particles that you would need 9 or 11 dimensions to describe the whole thing, to make sure you had everything accounted for. And so one of the ideas, it has been shown that particles can spontaneously become pure energy, and pure energy can spontaneously become particles. And this happens in fusion, in the process in stars that makes them glow and give off heat, life-giving heat and light. And so it's been speculated that these things are connected. The particles and the pure cosmic rays and tau mesons and so on are connected. And so they call it the dimension of the vacuum, and they say it's held together as though with strings. Now, as far as I know, no one's disproven string theory, but I hope in your lifetime it's figured out. And here's the example I give everybody. I'm not a physicist. I mean, I'm not a particle physicist. As a mechanical engineer, I'm sort of applied physics guy. But we have discovered in recent decades that there is this stuff called dark matter. So dark matter may comprise 94% of the cosmos, and we don't know hardly anything about it. But maybe in your lifetime it'll be figured out, and maybe the dark matter will come into existence and disappear and have gravitational influence and travel in waves based on string theory or something along that line. And I think about my grandfather, who came of age with no relativity. No one knew anything about Einstein's theory of relativity. Einstein wrote this theory that has been verified over and over and over, and you guys were alive this summer when we discovered, or measured rather, gravitational waves. So since light goes at the speed of light and electricity goes at the speed of light, it's reasonable that gravity goes at the speed of light, and apparently it does. But everybody in here has a mobile phone, and that phone global positioning system depends on our understanding of special relativity, where the speed of time, as I like to call it, is affected by the gravity of the Earth. The speed of time is affected by the speed of the spacecraft, and general relativity, where the speed of time is affected by the gravity of the Earth. So I just think about what will be discovered in your lifetime having to do with string theory and dark matter. Go get them! It's going to be amazing.
Okay, we have one more question here.
That's all. Geez, I've been talking.
Stand up, stand up.
Let's take a couple more. I'll go faster. Where are we? Over here. Go ahead.
Why is a meerkat called a meerkat?
What do you say?
Why is a meerkat called a bear cat?
A meerkat. I don't know. I'm not African. But it sure sounds Dutch to me.
You're next.
So, you can go almost anywhere in the world today, and people speak English. It's just crazy because of the influence of the United States culture. But 200 years ago, but if you go to Brazil, people speak Portuguese. If you go to Argentina, people speak Spanish. In Mexico, people speak Spanish. In South Africa, people speak a language that's nowadays called Afrikaans, but it's Dutch. A Dutch friend of mine can converse in Afrikaans pretty well. And so that when you see the two E's in a row, and then a cat with a K, that's almost certainly a result of Dutch. So I'll bet you the reason we call them meerkats is because some people of Dutch ancestry went, you know, that looks merely like a cat. And then we end up with a word.
Last one.
Okay, I think 3 really fast questions.
Okay, 3 fast questions.
Three
Okay.
fast ones.
Okay. So with the confirmation of a climate change denier as NASA's head administrator, how should we be preparing for a post-fact NASA?
You're talking about Jim Bridenstine.
Yeah.
Is from Oklahoma, and he has spoken against climate change. Note well, he sponsored a bill in Congress to use space assets, to use satellites, to monitor tornadoes in Oklahoma. So politics make strange bedfellows. Stay tuned. He's a NASA administrator that really loves space. So let's see what happens. Stay tuned.
Hi, not too long ago I actually went to see Neil deGrasse Tyson just kind of like this, and I almost got to ask him a question, but I was one of the very few in the very back of the line, and I was always wondering, like, what is your stance on the multiverse theory?
On multiverses? So are there multiverses or not? Well, here's the thing. It's the most satisfying theory. That's the way, if you know Lisa Randall, she's an astrophysicist at Harvard. That's the way, Harvard, in Boston. No, they all say, you know, where'd you go to school? I went to school in Boston. It's a little code. Anyway, I hear it's a good school. They didn't have an engineering school for a long time, but I guess it's okay anyway. The multiverse is the most satisfying idea, that we are not the only universe. Because if universes can just appear, then it means that we're not alone. So there's 2 questions that we all ask. Where did we all come from? And are we alone in the universe? And if it turns out that we are alone, that in those billions of stars and the billions of galaxies that each contain billions or hundreds of billions of stars, and we're the only thing thinking, that would be really sad. So right now there is no way to exclude multiverses, so perhaps you will be the astrophysicist who figures this out. Go get them. Last question. Where's the last question? Here it is.
In your personal opinion, what would the best way to combat climate change be?
There's 3 things we want to do. We want to electrify all ground transportation, and we want to produce electricity renewably. And then a problem I want you guys to solve is air transportation. Right now, we do not have a good substitute for kerosene, for jet fuel. And people speculate about making jet fuel from algae, from plants. Instead of having plants make swamp gas, which is, when you mine coal or get natural gas, that's ancient swamp gas trapped from an ancient swamp, trapped under soil. Maybe the solution, maybe what we want is hydrogen turbines. So liquid hydrogen doesn't have as much energy in it as liquid gasoline, but and it has to be kept very, very cold, but it doesn't weigh nearly as much. So maybe there'll be a convergence of lighter mass fuels, keeping it cold technology, and modifying jet engines so they work with hydrogen. So electrify ground transportation, all electricity renewable, and figure out a new way to fly airplanes. Get her done. Let's go.
You can see all the enthusiasm stick hands and disappointed eyes. There are so many questions in this room, so thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Everybody in this room, can we have a round of applause for the amazing...
Thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So thank you also for the many students who volunteered their time to usher and help support this evening. So thank you to the Mira Costa students. And you guys can go out there. Please buy a book from Pages. Thank you.